Welcome. Today we're going to be taking a look at The Walking Dead: No Sanctuary. This is a 1 to 4 player cooperative dice rolling hand management game in which you take the role of one of the characters from the hit TV show. You'll be moving that character around the board, taking actions, special abilities that are thematic to that character from the show, playing survivor cards, trying to complete a scenario. If you and your group of survivors complete the scenario, then you win the game. Now, there are 3 ways in which your group can lose the game. If you run out of event cards to draw, if your morale gets to 0, or if one of the survivors is defeated. Now that we know what the winning and losing conditions are, let's take a look at the components, setup, and how gameplay works in The Walking Dead: No Sanctuary. Now let's take a look at the components. You have your rule book, your scenario sheets, your map tiles, your walker figures, strangers and rival figures, action dice, stress dice, event cards that you'll be drawing at the end of each round, reference cards, search cards, map cards, survivor tokens, the leader token, morale and threat markers, lock, focus, trust, exert, corpse, stress, food, materials, and ammo. You have your group sheet, your ally, rival, and strangers sheets. And then for each of the survivors, you have your survivor decks and the corresponding survivor figure. Then you have your figure bases. These match these survivor tokens. Now let's take a look at the setup. Setup takes 10 steps, and we'll be setting this up for a 3-player game. Step 1, choose a scenario and create your map. If you are playing this for the first time, it is recommended that you choose Scavenging Run. Place the scenario sheet next to the play area. Step 2, place your group sheet and trackers. You'll place the group sheet to the side of the play area, and the morale marker on 10 and the threat marker on 0. Step 3, place the tokens and dice pools. You'll separate your tokens and dice and place them within reach of all the players. Step 4, you will separate your search and event cards. You'll separate the search and event cards by type. Step 5, choose survivors and allies. Each player chooses a survivor, and then in a 1 to 3 player game, they will choose an ally or allies as well. If you're playing a 2-player game, each player would choose 1 ally to control, and if you're playing a 3-player game, 1 person would choose 1 ally to control. Make sure you reference the scenario for survivor restrictions. Step 6, you will take your survivor components. You'll take the figure or standee, your survivor sheet, and place it face up in your play area, your survivor deck, which you will shuffle and place next to your survivor sheet, your survivor tokens, and a color base that match. You will place 5 of those tokens in your area and 1 next to the group sheet. If you are using an ally, you will take the figure or standee and use the back of the survivor sheet. Step 7, you will set up your scenario cards. You will shuffle each pile of search cards, then deal out a specific number of each based on your scenario sheet to create a central pile. Then you will separate it into equal stacks for each of the search icons on your scenario sheet. Also, you would then collect objective cards and shuffle 1 into each search deck if it is referenced on the scenario sheet. Then you will collect the event cards referenced on your scenario sheet and shuffle the cards together to create 1 stack. So in this scenario, we will have 2 equipment, 2 hazards, and 4 resource search cards that we would then separate into 4 stacks for each of the 4 locations on the main board. We would not use any objective cards. For the event deck, we will use Resources, Lurkers, and Shelter. Step 8, set up your scenario map. You'll reference your scenario and collect the specific walkers and special walkers to create the walker reserve, and then place the walkers on the map based on the scenario sheet. You will also be placing your survivors based on the scenario sheet. You would then place the special walkers reference card next to the reserve. So in this case, we have 15 walkers, 7 special walkers. And then for setup, we will place our survivors in A2. 3 walkers go in spaces C7, D9, and B6. You will place 2 special walkers in D1. And then you will place 1 walker in A7 and B8. And so at this point, you want to apply the special setup rules as well. So in this case, we will place 5 materials in the material resource pool. Step 9, determine the leader, read the story, and set up your scenario sheet. So you will shuffle the leader tokens, draw 1 at random to determine the leader, give them the leader token, have them read the story, and then flip over your scenario sheet, place an unused survivor on the first objective, and then place lock tokens on the remaining objectives. And then finally, step 10, draw a starting hand and gain trust. Each player will draw 3 cards from their survivor deck and gain 1 trust token. Before we start with the gameplay, make sure you place your map cards next to the play area. Now let's take a look at the gameplay. A game consists of rounds until either the scenario is completed and the survivors win the game, or the survivors lose the game because of one of the losing conditions. So either you run out of event cards, the morale goes to 0, or one of the survivors is defeated. Each round consists of 5 phases: planning, survivor, event, walker, and objective. Now let's take a look at each in detail. Phase 1, the planning phase. This is where the leader determines the group's approach for the round and everyone prepares for the round. This is done in 2 steps. Step 1, each player draws 1 card from their survivor deck. You are not allowed to reveal your cards unless you have a special ability that allows you to do so. If no cards are left in your survivor deck, then you are defeated and the group loses the game. And then step 2. The leader will draw 2 event cards and secretly choose 1 to play and 1 to neglect. The event in play is placed on the group sheet. When the leader chooses a card to neglect, the neglect effect occurs. If the group cannot fulfill the effect, group tension occurs, where either the morale goes down by 1 or each player spends 1 trust. So in this case, our leader would choose 2 event cards, 1 to neglect and 1 to play. So in this case, they would neglect 1 card and go through the neglect effect, and then they would go through the event card and the active event that is taking place. Phase 2, the survivor phase. This is where survivors take their turns. This is carried out in 2 steps. Step 1, you will play a survivor card from your hand and resolve the approach to the turn. This means you will compare the color of the card that you play to the event card. Each time a leader plays a color that is not the event color, they lose 1 trust because they're going against what they've told the entire group. And each time the other players play a card that is not the same color as the event, then the leader gains 1 stress because the group is not choosing to obey the wishes of the leader. And then step 2. Perform 1 maneuver and 1 action. You can do them in either order, but you are not allowed to split up your actions or maneuvers. There are 4 standard maneuvers: move, hide, focus, and resource. When you move, you would move up, down, left, or right up to 2 spaces, or stand up, you exert 1 for each walker that is in that space. When exerting, you must discard a survivor card each time. If a player cannot discard 1, they are defeated and the group loses. When you hide, you reduce threat by 1, and then if you are in a space with no enemies, you reduce stress by 1. When you choose the focus maneuver, you gain 1 focus. When you choose the resource maneuver, these are special maneuvers on the group sheet. You would discard the resource and gain the effect. And then there are 3 standard actions: grapple, search, or assist. You would perform the action, then perform an action roll. To perform an action roll, you would create the action pool, collecting dice based on the characteristics. So if you were going to create an action pool for Daryl, if you had the search or interact action that you were taking, you would start with 2 dice. Then you would add 1 stress dice for each stress token that you have on your character sheet, and add 1 if there is at least 1 walker in your space. Then you would roll the dice and trigger the result. If you rolled the dice, each check is a success. The eye icon is focus, and then the drop is exert. If you were doing an action from the survivor card and you had a matching characteristic, then any of your exert results go to success. And if not, you would exert 1 to change 1 exert to a success. Then you would trigger the focus by spending 1 focus to change a focus to a success. Then you would apply your successes. Choose where to spend your successes based on how many successes you had in your die roll. Then if you rolled the stress dice, you would resolve the threat result, which is the lightning bolts. For each, you would move the threat tracker up 1. Then you would resolve the fear result. For each fear result on the stress die, you would resolve the result based on the survivor's card that you played during this turn. So if Daryl played this card, he would resolve the effect at the bottom for his fear result. Then you would gain focus. You would gain a focus token for any focus left in your die result up to 5. When you exert, you must discard a survivor card each time. If a player can't discard, they are defeated and the group loses. When searching, if drawing and getting a locked objective, then the card would go back to the stack face up, and the deck is then locked until the objective is unlocked and the objective card can be drawn. When you are playing your survivor card, if you played this survivor card, then you would have an option for a special maneuver. But if you ended up playing this card, then it would be an action. Then you would be able to roll your action die and possibly choose either of those actions. When playing an ally, it would use the matching approach of the survivor that controls the ally. Now let's take a look at a couple of the special rules that could occur during this phase. Group tension. These are situations that threaten the morale of the group. Players must all discard 1 trust each or drop the morale, and any dispute that players have is settled by the leader. The possible group tensions are when a survivor must discard a token they don't have, placing a walker and none are left in the reserve, players are unable to take on stress, and then the threat track runs out of room. Now let's talk about stress. When performing an action, you would roll stress dice equal to the stress markers on the survivor sheet, plus 1 if they occupy a space with a walker. Trust. Each survivor can have a max of 5 trust tokens. You have to have at least 1 trust token for anyone to trigger their survival ability. Trust is also used to settle group tension. Survivor tokens. These mark completed event abilities. Search. When you are searching, you must be located in an orange square that has a search deck. It does not matter which square you are in if they cover multiple squares. Search cards are always resolved before searching again. Buildings. Buildings also have orange outlines. Barricades. Barricades hinder walker movement and are placed on walls to a maximum of 3 on each space. When walkers approach barricades, if the number of walkers is less than or equal to the number of barricades, the walkers are then knocked down. If the number of walkers are greater than the number of barricades, one of the barricades is removed, and if any remain, the walkers are knocked down, and if not, they move as normal. Range. The number of spaces away, adjacent, or diagonal. So our survivors here have a range of 1 for any of those boxes, a range of 2, and so on. Line of sight. This is drawn from the center of a space to the center of a target space. If you are in a building, you ignore walls, and if not, you must observe the walls. That brings us to Phase 3, the event phase. This is where the special rules in the event is resolved. This takes 2 steps. Step 1 is to resolve any special rules. And then Step 2, resolve the event. If the active event has no survivor token on it, the leader takes 1 stress. If it has at least 1 survivor token, no one suffers stress, and the event is discarded. Phase 4, the walker phase. This is where the walkers move and more are placed on the board. This takes place in 2 steps. 1, reanimate. Replace each corpse token with a knockdown walker. Step 2, walker activation, where each ready walker activates. You would start with overrun. These are the first spaces to activate, walkers and humans in the same space. If this occurs, the survivors must exert the number equal to the walkers in the space. Then swarm. Activate a space where walkers are next to a space with humans. If they are equal spaces adjacent to humans, you would use random movements to choose which humans they would go to. Shamble. Each walker will move 1 space toward the closest human, then knock down each walker that moves, and then you would be able to stand all of the knocked down walkers up so that they are ready for the next round. When you determine random directions, you would use the map card for their priority when they are equal distance from the survivors. The shortest movement path always indicates the closest. Barricades knock down walkers if it's less than or equal to the barricade number. And if not, you would remove 1 barricade and then knock down unless there are no more barricades left. That moves us to Phase 5, the objective plan. This is where the group checks the objectives and possibly passes leadership. This is done in 2 steps. Step 1 is the objective step, where you check the current objective and resolve in order. So in this first objective, there are 2 things that would take place. When the objective moves, you would check for immediate effect. So in this case, if at least 1 survivor is outside, we would resolve group tension. And then the second would be as if each survivor is in a building with at least 1 barricade, we would advance the objective. And then step 2 is the leader step. The current leader can discard 1 trust to pass leadership to the left. If the leader is fully stressed, they must discard 1 trust and pass the leadership. Then rounds would continue if the event deck runs out, or morale gets to 0, or one of the survivors is defeated, then the survivors would lose the game. And then if rounds continue and the survivors finish the last objective, then the survivors win no sanctuary.